My name is Sarah. My husband, Marco, was the best thing that ever happened to me. He was my rock, my confidant, my everything. Unfortunately, he passed away in a tragic motorcycle accident exactly 8 years ago, on April 29th, 2008. Even after all this time, his absence remains a void I've never been able to fill. Writing these words now stirs feelings I had long buried. For so long, I avoided revisiting what I'm about to share with you, but I think I'm finally ready to face these ghosts. Marco and I grew up in a small town in Italy. English is actually my second language, so please forgive any minor mistakes. Marco always dreamed of traveling to Greece. It was a wish he held since our early years together, but for one reason or another, we kept postponing that trip. My biggest regret? Not taking a summer off from work to make that dream a reality with him. When he passed, the weight of that regret became unbearable. It wasn't until the spring of 2016 that I mustered the courage to visit Greece. I was 36 without children, and the idea of traveling alone made me uneasy. So I opted for a cruise, thinking it might be less lonely. I was fortunate to find a perfect package covering 6 amazing cities: Athens, Santorini, Mykonos, Ephesus, Volos, and Thessaloniki, before returning to Athens. I tried to convince myself this trip was a tribute to Marco's dream, but honestly, the whole idea felt melancholy. On the night the ship left Athens, I decided to have a few drinks. Maybe more than I should have. The wine provided a brief moment of relief from the weight in my chest, but also a strange sense of displacement, as if I didn't belong in that place or that moment. Deep down, I knew this trip wouldn't be enough to fill the void. On the second night of the cruise, something happened that changed the course of the trip. I was in the bar area, watching the waves crash against the ship as soft jazz music filled the air. It was nearly midnight, and the place was starting to empty, with passengers retreating to their cabins. I'd already had 2 glasses of wine, trying to calm a restless mind that kept pulling me back to all I had lost. It was then that I decided to return to my cabin. As I walked through the quiet corridors, I noticed a strange breeze. It was odd considering we were out at sea and all the doors should have been closed. When I passed by one of the public balconies, I felt something different, like someone was watching me, but when I turned, there was no one there. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just exhaustion and the wine playing tricks on me. I reached my cabin, closed the door, and fell onto the bed, exhausted. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I began to hear a strange sound, a soft tapping at the balcony door. The wind was moving the curtains, but I knew I had locked everything before leaving. My heart started racing, but I got up to check. When I pulled the curtains back, I felt a chill run down my spine. The glass door was ajar. At first I thought I must have forgotten to lock it, but something about the air felt wrong. I approached the door cautiously and shut it firmly, locking the latch. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, fueled by exhaustion and emotional tension. But as I lay back down, I heard another sound, a whisper, low and indistinct, like it came from outside. My heart pounded, and I braved another trip to the balcony. There was nothing there, just the vast, dark sea and the moonlight reflecting off the water. I tried to ignore it, but that feeling of being watched didn't leave. I was convinced someone or something was there. The next morning, I tried to push it out of my mind, but an unsettling feeling lingered. The next port was Mykonos, a place I was eager to explore. When I arrived, the streets were bathed in bright sunlight, and everything seemed calm and beautiful, as if nothing had happened the night before. I ignored the discomfort I felt and walked through the charming, narrow streets, appreciating the unique architecture and tranquility of the town. But as I moved through the streets, the feeling of being watched returned. It was as if someone was following me, though I saw no one. This only heightened my discomfort. Eventually, I spotted a cozy bar on a side street and decided to enter, hoping a drink would distract me and make me forget everything. The bar was quiet, and I quickly found a spot at the counter. I ordered a martini and let myself relax. As I glanced around, something familiar caught my eye. There he was again, standing in a corner, staring at me without saying a word. My stomach churned, and panic set in. I didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but his gaze was different. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It felt like he knew who I was, like he'd been waiting for me. I tried to avoid his gaze, focusing instead on my drink. But no matter how much I distracted myself, he was still there, like a shadow. My heart raced, and sweat beaded on my forehead. I knew I had to get out of there. When I glanced again, he was gone. I left the bar and wandered through Mykonos, trying to shake off the fear that had consumed me. Around every corner, I felt eyes on me, but no one was there. The man seemed to vanish as though he'd never existed. Despite trying to convince myself it was all in my head, the sense of being followed never went away. That night, back in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. The encounter haunted me, and I knew it wasn't something I could ignore. The following day, in Volos, I resolved not to let fear dictate my actions. I spent the day exploring the city, avoiding bars and alcohol, as if my sanity depended on it. The peaceful night brought a rare moment of calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, lurking just beyond my sight. As I walked back to the port, I saw him again, standing in the middle of the street, staring at me. There was no denying it this time. My heart sank, and I ran towards him, but when I reached the corner, he was gone. It felt as if he had never been there. I was devastated. I couldn't sleep that night, reliving every detail of the silent pursuit. I knew it wasn't my imagination. I didn't know what he wanted or why he was watching me, but something was happening. Something I couldn't explain. The following morning, in Thessaloniki, the last city on my cruise, I told myself it was time to find answers, but the fear was still there. And deep down, I knew I couldn't escape whatever this was. What was he looking for? Why was he watching me? These questions plagued me, but the answers remained out of reach, leaving only a persistent sense of terror and uncertainty.
The vacation had started off perfectly. As a now senior at Rowan University, I felt I needed a break after a grueling semester. My friends, always calling me Lucas, Sarah, Camila, and Thiago, decided that a cruise through the Bahamas would be a great idea. We had all just turned 21, and the plan was simple: drink, relax, and forget our worries. It was supposed to be a trip of fun and freedom. Sarah and I always had a somewhat tense relationship. Though we were cordial, there was an undercurrent of silent drama between us, something I attributed to her critical nature and competitiveness. On the other hand, Camila and Thiago were my confidants, those friends I could always count on. I believed this trip would help us bond even more, but I had no idea it would turn into a nightmare. Our carnival cruise promised unforgettable experiences. The itinerary included some paradise islands in the Bahamas before we returned to New York. We arrived at our first destination, Paradise Island, and could barely contain our excitement. The night began at a local bar where we laughed loudly and flirted with strangers, savoring every moment as if it were our last. I remember Sarah asking me to grab another round of drinks. Despite our differences, I obliged, heading to the bar to place the order. As I waited, Camila approached and we took some selfies with our drinks. She was the type who loved capturing every moment. But something started slipping out of control. In my distraction, I left my phone on the bar for a second while grabbing the drinks. I didn't think twice. After all, we were in a relaxed and safe environment. When I noticed, Sarah called Camila and she ran off, leaving her drink behind. Wanting to ensure no one took it, I grabbed both drinks and returned to our group. Later, as the ship sailed away from the island, I felt that cold chill that comes with realizing something was wrong. My phone was gone. I woke up the next morning with a mild headache, unsure if it was from the drinks or the uneasy feeling that had stayed with me since realizing my phone was missing. We were docked at another island, an even more remote place surrounded by crystal clear waters and towering palm trees. I should have been relaxed, but something didn't feel right. Thiago, always the cheerful one, tried to distract me by insisting I join them for breakfast on the main deck. Sarah and Camila were already there, laughing and showing videos they had recorded on Sarah's phone. My unease deepened when I noticed they avoided looking directly at me. Camila, usually so friendly, seemed tense. "Hey, Did you guys see my phone? I asked casually, but with a hint of worry in my voice. Sarah gave me a quick, almost uncomfortable look before responding, "No, you probably left it somewhere. Might have been at the bar yesterday." Something about the way she spoke bothered me. It was as if she was hiding something. I pushed the feeling aside and started searching the ship, at the bar from the previous night, the hallways, and even asking the cruise staff, but no one had seen my phone. Throughout the day, I noticed Thiago and Camila were oddly quiet. Every time I brought up the phone, they either brushed it off or quickly changed the subject. My paranoia grew. It wasn't just the lost phone. It was the feeling that my friends were hiding something from me. That night, while everyone was in the main lounge enjoying a show, I decided to confront Sarah. I knocked on her cabin door with force, and she opened it, surprised. "What's going on, Lucas? What kind of scene is this?" "Sarah, I know you know something about my phone," I said bluntly. She laughed nervously, crossing her arms. "Are you crazy? Why would I know anything?" "Because you've been acting weird all day. And honestly, I don't trust you from the start of this trip," I responded, maybe more aggressively than I intended. Sarah stared at me for a few seconds, deciding whether to say something. "Lucas, maybe you should ask Camila," she said before closing the door in my face. My heart pounded. What did Camila have to do with this? I couldn't sleep that night. Sarah's last words echoed in my head. Ask Camila. Why would she mention Camila? She had always been the most trustworthy friend of the group, the one I felt safest with. But now I needed answers. The next morning, I waited until I found Camila alone on the deck, staring at the sea. She seemed lost in the view, unaware of my presence. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my thoughts before approaching. "Camila, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She turned, and something in her expression made me uneasy. There was a mix of guilt and hesitation. "Sure, Lucas, what's up?" "It's about my phone. Sarah said I should talk to you." "What's going on?" I asked directly, watching her reaction. Camila went pale. For a moment, she opened her mouth to speak but didn't utter a word. Finally, she sighed, as if preparing to confess something she'd been holding back for a long time. "Lucas, I didn't know how to tell you this," she began, nervously avoiding my gaze. "Last night, while you were distracted at the bar, I saw Thiago take your phone. I thought it was weird, but I figured he was just messing around, you know how he is." My stomach twisted. I felt a mix of anger and confusion. "So why didn't you tell me sooner? Why leave me searching like an idiot?" "I thought he'd give it back," she explained, clearly distressed. "But when I saw he was acting strange all day, I started to suspect there was something more going on. I just didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to cause problems between you two." My head was spinning with the information. Thiago was someone I trusted completely. Why would he do something like this? Without hesitation, I went to confront him. I found Thiago in the main lounge, laughing and joking like nothing had happened. As soon as he saw me approaching with a determined expression, his smile faded. "Thiago, I need to talk to you. Now," I said firmly. He tried to act nonchalant but appeared nervous. "What's up, man?" "Where's my phone?" I asked, no preamble. For a second, he hesitated but then let out a forced laugh. "Oh, that? Relax. I just borrowed it as a joke." "Joke? You took my phone and left me searching like an idiot?" My voice was filled with anger. Finally, he sighed and pulled my phone out of his pocket. "I was gonna give it back, man. It was just a joke, all right?" I grabbed my phone and walked away without saying another word. It wasn't just about the phone. It was the breach of trust, something I couldn't ignore. The atmosphere of the trip had changed. What was supposed to be a fun, carefree vacation with friends was now tainted by betrayal. After confronting Thiago, I thought the story was over. I got my phone back. But the feeling of betrayal wouldn't leave me. I spent the rest of the afternoon quiet and distant, trying to process what had happened. But something still felt off. Camila had hesitated too much when she spoke to me, like she was hiding something. And Thiago? He seemed more nervous than someone who had just borrowed a phone as a joke. I decided to check my phone. Maybe there was a clue, some message or photo that could explain why Thiago did what he did. When I opened my gallery, my heart raced. There was a video, one I didn't remember recording. With trembling hands, I hit play. The image was dark and shaky, but I recognized the place, the living area of the boat. The camera seemed to have been placed on a table, capturing Camila and Thiago talking in hushed tones. "This is going to end badly, Thiago," Camila whispered, glancing around as if afraid of being heard. "Relax. He'll never figure it out," Thiago replied coldly. "But why would you do that? Why would you take his phone? This doesn't make any sense." "I needed a reason to access his messages, Camila. You don't get it? He was hiding something from me, and I had to find out what it was." My mind spun. Thiago had accessed my messages. Why? The video continued, and the next part crushed me. "You know what this means, right?" Camila said, her voice filled with worry. "If Lucas finds out, he'll never trust any of us." "He won't find out," Thiago replied, cold and detached. "If he does, I'll handle it." I paused the video, unable to watch any further. This wasn't just about the phone anymore. Thiago had invaded my privacy, and Camila knew everything. My blood boiled, but beyond that, the feeling of vulnerability was unbearable. That night, I mustered the courage to confront both of them together. I called them to my cabin, locking the door behind me. "So you both want to tell me the truth, or should I show this video to everyone on the boat?" Their reaction was instant. Camila went pale and Thiago crossed his arms, trying to maintain a defiant posture, but I could see the fear in their eyes. "What do you want, Lucas? Revenge?" Thiago asked, his voice shaky. "No," I said, my tone calm but firm. "I want the truth, and if it means losing all of you, so be it." In the end, we were never the same again. The trust was gone, and the friendship we once had was lost. That vacation was supposed to be a memory of freedom and laughter. Instead, it became a story of betrayal, one that I'll carry with me forever.
Ever since I was a child, I've had an inexplicable fascination with the sea. While others dreamed of becoming doctors, lawyers, or artists, my dream was far more peculiar. I wanted to be a bartender on a cruise ship. What drew me wasn't just the idea of traveling the world, but the promise of meeting people from all corners, each with their own unique and fascinating stories. At 27, I finally made that dream a reality. With several years of bartending experience under my belt, I applied for a position with the prestigious Royal Seas Cruise Line. To my surprise, I was quickly accepted, and soon I was boarding my first voyage as a bartender on a transatlantic cruise. The first few weeks were a mix of euphoria and exhaustion. The constant flow of passengers was overwhelming, and working back-to-back nights demanded far more than I had anticipated. But that intensity was exactly what I had sought. Each night brought new faces, stories, laughter, and sometimes tears. During a 12-day transatlantic cruise from Miami to Lisbon, I met someone who would completely reshape my perception of this job. His name was Daniel, tall, with piercing green eyes, and a commanding presence that drew attention wherever he went. Unlike other passengers filling the bar, Daniel exuded an air of mystery. He always sat in the same corner, sipping slowly, as if lost in his own thoughts. At first, he was just another guest, but night after night, his constant presence piqued my curiosity. Who was he? What brought him here, alone, on such a long journey? One night, after a glass of wine, he began to open up. Reluctantly at first, he spoke about his wife, Larissa, and what seemed to be a crumbling marriage. He described his pain with unsettling honesty, and before I knew it, we were engaged in a conversation far beyond the usual small talk. For a moment, I forgot I was behind the bar. It felt as if we were isolated from the rest of the world, two strangers sharing secrets adrift at sea. I should have been wary. Something about the way he spoke, the details he revealed, felt calculated. But in the moment, I let myself get swept away. He wasn't just a guest. He was an enigma I wanted to unravel. Looking back, I realized not all mysteries are worth chasing. Working on a cruise ship is a blend of glamour and isolation. Surrounded by luxury and people from all walks of life, yet living in the middle of the ocean, there's a certain solitude that's hard to escape. It was in this setting that things began to shift for me. After several nights of talking with Daniel, I began to sense something off. My coworkers started giving me curious glances, and one of them, Thiago, pulled me aside during a break. Thiago was the type who knew everything that happened on the ship, always tuned into the rumors circulating through the halls. "Be careful with him," Thiago said bluntly. "That guy has caused trouble on other cruises. He's not someone you can trust." I laughed, thinking he was exaggerating. "Trouble? What kind of trouble?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "He gets involved with people, especially crew members, and then, let's just say he leaves behind a mess. I'm warning you because I like you. I don't want to see you caught up in something messy." Those words stuck with me for days. Was I letting myself be drawn in by someone I barely knew? Yet, Daniel seemed so genuine. It was difficult to ignore the connection I felt during our conversations. He wasn't like the other passengers, who were only interested in vacations and fun. He carried a melancholy I believed I could understand. Still, I decided to tread carefully. I reduced our conversations and tried to maintain a more professional distance. But Daniel didn't back down. It was as though he sensed I was pulling away. And instead of letting it go, he intensified his efforts. He began waiting for me at the bar each night, asking about my life and leaving cryptic notes like, "Sometimes the strongest connections happen in the most unexpected places." The attention was flattering and unsettling at the same time. With each note, each smile he gave from across the bar, I felt drawn to something I couldn't fully understand. Ignoring Thiago's warning was my biggest mistake. At the time, it felt like I was following my heart. But in hindsight, I realized I was blind to something far darker. Daniel wasn't who I thought he was, and the truth about him would come to light in ways I could never have anticipated. One night, as I cleaned the bar near the end of my shift, he approached, quieter than usual. His expression was different, more serious, almost troubling. Before I could ask what was wrong, he handed me an envelope. "I need to show you something," he said in a low voice. Hesitant, I took the envelope, trying to hide my anxiety. The bar was empty, and the silence of the environment only amplified my apprehension. Inside the envelope was a photo. Daniel was in it, but what caught my attention was the woman beside him. She looked familiar, though I couldn't quite place her. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice trembling. He sighed and looked away. "It's my wife." For a moment, it felt as though my world tilted. My mind spun, and everything around me blurred. He continued speaking, but I could barely process his words. "I couldn't tell you before," he said. "My life is complicated, but I felt I needed to be honest. I can't continue without you knowing." I felt a lump in my throat, the ground beneath me seeming to vanish. All the conversations, the glances, the notes, everything that had felt so special now felt like a lie. "Why did you do this? Why did you come to me?" Anger mixed with disappointment surged within me. He tried to explain, talking about feeling lost, about how his marriage was crumbling, and how I made him feel alive again. But none of that mattered. He had lied, and I was caught in something that should never have begun. That night, after he left, I lingered at the bar longer than I should have, trying to process it all. Staring out at the dark sea through the small window, I knew I was involved in something that could spiral completely out of my control. Something told me this revelation was just the beginning of something far darker. After my conversation with Daniel, my world shattered. The pain of betrayal turned into something even more terrifying. He left that night, but the feeling of abandonment haunted me. What disturbed me even more was his disappearance. The next day, Daniel didn't show up at the bar. I figured maybe he was still processing the conversation or avoiding it. But as days went by and he didn't appear, my worry grew. I called him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Messages went unanswered. Each unanswered call added to my growing unease. Where was he? Why wasn't he reaching out? His silence was deafening. My heart was split between anger, fear, and concern. My mind raced with scenarios. Maybe he had gone somewhere distant, trying to escape his problems, or something far worse had happened. I didn't know what, but the void left behind only deepened as the days passed. I went to his house, but it was empty. The door locked, everything seemingly abandoned. There was no sign of him anywhere. I couldn't believe he could just vanish without leaving a trace. Why had he left me in this limbo? Why had he abandoned me in the dark? Desperate to find answers, I went to the police, but they seemed powerless. No one could help me. Their silence added to my despair. I knew something was wrong, something didn't make sense, but each search, each attempt to find him, led to nothing. The answers I sought were still out of reach, leaving me alone with the unknown. After days, with no word from Daniel, I was beginning to accept the possibility that he might never return. The absence felt constant, an unfillable void. But one night, everything changed unexpectedly. As I left work, I noticed someone standing at the corner, as if waiting. When I got closer, my heart skipped a beat. It was Daniel. He was there, as if nothing had happened. I didn't know if I should approach him or stay put. Anger, fear, and sadness all fought within me. How could he just appear like this, as if nothing had changed? None of it made sense. My world had been turned upside down, and now there he was, like he had never left. Slowly I walked toward him. I couldn't believe I was really seeing Daniel. His gaze was distant, as if he were lost in his own thoughts. My heart pounded as I wondered if he understood the impact he had caused, if he even grasped what I was feeling. "Daniel," my voice trembled. "Where were you? Why?" He took a long time to answer, as if unsure where to begin. His eyes, once familiar, were now empty, and the silence that followed was deafening. Finally, he whispered, "I needed space. I didn't know what I wanted, or what I was searching for." His words didn't bring relief, only more confusion. How could someone simply disappear and claim they needed space? Everything felt like empty words that didn't align with the pain I felt. That night left me even more lost. Daniel was there, but it felt like he didn't understand the depth of what he had done. And me? I wondered if I could ever find peace in a world that had become so unfamiliar. To this day, I can't forget the silence between us. It lingers, a reminder of a truth I still grapple with. Some mysteries are meant to stay hidden. Story 4. They say curiosity killed the cat, but sometimes it kills far more than that. I learned this the hard way, during a time I should have heeded the warnings instead of chasing what seemed too intriguing to resist. It was just another quiet shift on the cruise ship where I worked as a bartender. The sea was calm, the passengers were mostly asleep, and the ship itself hummed with the rhythmic sounds of engines beneath the waves. I was busy cleaning the bar, lost in my own thoughts, when I noticed a figure approaching. He wasn't just any passenger, he carried an aura of importance. His suit was impeccably tailored, his watch gleamed under the low lights, and his presence commanded attention. His name was Gregory. Unlike the rest of the passengers, who were carefree and vacation-bound, Gregory seemed preoccupied, his expression distant. The first time we spoke, I thought he was just another rich traveler who needed a drink. But as we talked, something shifted. He wasn't interested in small talk. His gaze was sharp, almost piercing, as if he could see straight through me. "I've been watching you," he said one night after a few drinks. His voice was calm, measured. It wasn't a compliment, nor a threat. It was simply a statement. Curious, I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what exactly have you been watching?" He smiled faintly, as though amused by my response. "You're not like the others. There's something about you. Something you don't realize." I shrugged, brushing it off. Just someone trying to do their job. But Gregory wasn't one to be ignored. He continued to appear at the bar every night, each time slipping into deeper, more personal conversations. Unlike Daniel, who had captivated me with his melancholy, Gregory seemed to have a darker edge. His questions were probing, his tone unsettling. One night, after he'd been drinking a bit more than usual, he leaned in close. "There's something you should know," he said in a low voice. "Something you should see." That night, he slipped a small, slim envelope into my hand. Inside was a single photograph, an image of the ship, but not the kind I had ever seen. The photo was grainy, dark, as if it had been taken from far below the water. What stood out wasn't just the ship, but the figure in the distance. A figure that wasn't supposed to be there. What is this? My voice shook as I stared at the image. Gregory's smile didn't falter. That, my dear, is what they don't want you to see. It's what they've been hiding. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Hiding? From who? You wouldn't understand, he said cryptically. Not yet. The ship, the passengers, the crew, all of it suddenly felt like a veil was lifting. I couldn't explain the sensation, but the more I stared at that photograph, the more I felt like I was being drawn into something far beyond my understanding. Gregory disappeared the following day. No one else saw him, and when I searched, there was no record of him on the ship. He was gone as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving behind only that mysterious photograph. What disturbed me most wasn't just the photo, but the feeling that came with it. It was as though I had glimpsed something I wasn't supposed to. Something unsettling. Something dangerous. I kept the photograph hidden, not knowing what to do with it. The questions it raised were too heavy, too dangerous to face. To this day, I wonder if there's more out there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Sometimes, curiosity truly does kill the cat. If not physically, then mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually. And me? I still live with that haunting question. What was Gregory trying to tell me? And what lies beneath the surface of this world we claim to know so well,